What is going on, everybody? Welcome to or back to Ryder's Record Collection. My name is Carl, and in this video I wanted to do the tunes tag, or the jazz vinyl tag for 2021, put on by Chris from Tunes from the Man Cave. It's 21 questions pertaining to the jazz albums I have in my collection, and I want to come out with a full disclaimer here in the beginning. I am not a big jazz guy. I'm turning into a big jazz guy, although I'm new to the field of jazz. I primarily, in my collection, have rock and classic rock. If you watch my channel, you know that. So some of these questions I don't have answers for, but like I said, getting into jazz, so I'm going to take a stab at this. I've seen some good videos on it. So without any further ado, we will kick this thing off. So the first question for the jazz vinyl tag is an album that got you into jazz. And if you have watched other videos on my channel, you'll know that I'm a big fan of this guy, Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass, Whipped Cream and Other Delights. This is the album that got me into jazz, and specifically it was seeing him in concert. My aunt got me this album when I first got into collecting records, like 10 or so years ago. Found out I was starting to collect records. She went to the thrift store, found this for $1, pretty common album you can find, and I did not get rid of it because of the cover. It was something that I always liked, and occasionally I listened to. This was, for a long time, the only jazz album I had. So this is what started the inclination of collecting jazz and getting into jazz. This is Herb Alpert's fourth album with the Tijuana Brass, released in 1965, but what really kicked off my deep dive into jazz was seeing him in concert, which I saw in 2018 with my grandparents. They called me and they were like, "Hey, your parents say you like Herb Alpert, you want to go see him in concert?" So I said yes, and that really started my headfirst dive into jazz, and I'll show you the concert ticket right now. So this is the concert ticket from that show. I saw him in 2018 with his wife Lonnie Hall, and the combination of this album and actually seeing a pretty solid jazz artist in concert really started my headfirst dive into jazz. So the album that got me into jazz is Herb Alpert, the Tijuana Brass, Whipped Cream and Other Delights. So the second question is the first jazz album you bought, and I specifically remember buying this at work during my lunch break on eBay. I had exhausted pretty much, not exhausted, but I had gotten all of the classic rock albums that I wanted, and I am, constantly buying new modern rock albums, but this was shortly after seeing Herb Alpert in concert, and I decided that I wanted to get into jazz, and this is Miles Davis' greatest hits. I had seen a lot of people talk about Miles Davis. He's pretty popular all around, especially in the VC. So I decided that the first jazz album that I would really get to suck me into jazz would be a greatest hits album by none other than Miles Davis. And this is a really good place to start with Miles Davis. It has 7 Steps to Heaven, which I believe is from Kind of Blue, All Blues, Someday My Prince Will Come, Walkin', My Funny Valentine, Around Midnight, and So What, which is also from Kind of Blue, but the album, this version of So What, was recorded live in Carnegie Hall in New York City on May 19th, 1961. So the first jazz album I bought was Miles Davis' greatest hits. So the next two questions is where my disclaimer comes in. As I said, I'm getting into collecting jazz. I'm very new to the field of collecting jazz and learning about jazz, and I'm just getting my feet wet with it. So the next question is an album you own on Blue Note, and I don't own an album on Blue Note. And the question after that is an album you own on Prestige, and I don't own an album on Prestige. So I'm open to suggestions, recommendations. I'd love to check out new music, especially new jazz music. So anyone have any recommendations on good albums on those two labels, I'd love to check them out. But as far as Blue Notes and Prestige, I have none in my collection yet. But I do have an answer for this next question. That's an album you own on Impulse. So this is John Coltrane, A Love Supreme. This is the only album I think I own on Impulse. And this was an album that, even when I was streaming jazz before I actually bought a jazz album, was something that I was really interested in. It's a little out there, it's a little weird. If you've heard it, you know exactly what I'm talking about, but it's good. It's very good. So this is my album that I own on Impulse, and this is a Newberry Comics pressing of it, and the album is on clear vinyl, so I'll show that, but it has the Impulse label. So an album I own on Impulse is John Coltrane, A Love Supreme, and it is just a a killer album. Next is an album you own on Riverside. This is the only album I actually own on Riverside. This is Wes Montgomery Fusion. Basically Wes Montgomery with an orchestra backing him. I found that I really like that jazz guitar that Wes Montgomery does. This is the only album I own by Wes Montgomery right now, but it will not be the only one I continue to own. I really enjoy this album, and like I said, it's the only album I own on Riverside, so an album on Riverside. So next is a record you own on a subsidiary or small jazz label, and I'm not super familiar with what labels specifically produce jazz. I know that Verve does a lot of jazz. I know that Columbia has some jazz artists. I know that A&M has a lot of jazz, but they're all big labels. This is an album on Vortex, and I'm not familiar with Vortex, but I think they're a smaller label. I picked this album specifically because it's a jazz album. But this is Steve Marcus, Tomorrow Never Knows, and this album has a killer version of Mellow Yellow by Donovan and Tomorrow Never Knows by the Beatles. This is a really, really funky album. This guy, Steve Marcus, he goes for it, and there's my Uncle Chunk. You can see his name on the back. So an album I own on a smaller subsidiary label is Steve Marcus, Tomorrow Never Knows on the Vortex label. All right, so next is a record you own that not many people know about but should. The second I read this question, I had to pick this album. This is Herb Alpert presents Sergio Mendes and Brazil 66. This album just kicks, man. It's so good. Beautiful, beautiful melodic voices, nice tempo changes. As I've progressed in my jazz journey, I found that I'm a big fan of that bossa nova jazz, and this is a prime example of just good bossa nova jazz. This album won an award in 1966 when it was released. I'm not sure what the award was for, but it's definitely worthy of several awards. This is a beautiful album from start to finish. Some of the standout tracks on this are One Note Samba, Spanish Flea, The Joker, which is just a beautiful song. Going Out of My Head, Day Tripper. They do a cover on the Beatles in here, and Opato. Just the whole album from start to finish is just beautiful. So if you haven't heard this one, I highly suggest you check this out. And funny little correlation with this one, Herb Alpert's wife is Lonnie Hall. I believe she is that one. And when I saw him in concert in 2018, she was accompanying him and she was singing, and they did a couple songs off this album with Herb Alpert playing the trumpet and Lonnie Hall singing, and it was just absolutely beautiful. But this is an album that not many people know about but should. I can't say enough good things about this album, and it's really, really a pretty album. So next is your favorite jazz album bought in 2020, and this was a Record Store Day release for the first time ever pressed on vinyl. This is Squirrel Nut Zippers, The Inevitable, and this album was part of that 90s big band swing revival. This was released in 95, and this is jazz swing music, and it cooks. This is a great jazz album. If you haven't heard this one, this could be, for the previous question, jazz album not many people know about but should, but this was my favorite pickup in 2020. They have another album that's really good called Hot, but Squirrels Nut Zippers, if you haven't heard of them, I highly suggest you check them out. Some standout tracks from this are Lover's Lane, I Found a New Baby, Good Enough for Grandad, which is just a really good song, La Grippe, and just the whole thing's really good, but this was my favorite pickup of 2020. And it's the amount of styles of music that this band touches on in a single album and maybe even a single song is great. The song that I would recommend that you check out is not on this album, but it's called Hell, and it's from their album Hot. But if you're interested in checking out Squirrel Nut Zippers, I would check out Lover's Lane, Good Enough for Grandad, or the song Hell. Very good album, so my favorite jazz pickup of 2020. Next is your favorite album in an artist's discography. And this artist has a huge discography that I'm slowly wading through. But right now, my favorite album out of this guy's discography is Duke Ellington at Newport. This was recorded at the Newport Jazz Festival in, I believe, July 7th, 1956. And this is just killer. This whole album with the crowd noises and the cheering and just the improvisation on stage, you really feel like you're sitting at the Newport Jazz Festival in 1966. So I am slowly wading through his discography, but right now this is my favorite album of his discography. This is Duke Ellington and Newport, and very, very good. So next is your favorite record bought in a brick and mortar shop. And for this one, I got to go with Jazz Samba, Stan Getz. I am a big fan of the bossa nova jazz. I'm not sure if I'm going to mention that yet in this video. This is the bossa nova is the jazz that I tend to gravitate more. I really like that groove and not super out there extravagant jazz. And this is my favorite pickup that I got in a record store. This is a killer album from start to finish. And Jazz Samba, Stan Getz, Charlie Bird, two jazz soloists play fresh contemporary sounds from modern Brazilian folk music. Really good album. So this is my favorite pickup that I've gotten in a brick and mortar store. But I have to give an honorable mention to this album, which I also got in a brick and mortar store. Amy Winehouse, Back to Black. You can consider this to be like an R&B album, but this is a pretty good jazz album, and it's just a killer album. Amy Winehouse opened the door to a lot of younger people getting into jazz and things like that didn't necessarily know about jazz. This was an album that I had always enjoyed, even before I really got into the other jazz that I've shown. So I gotta give this an honorable mention. Not gonna pick it because it's R&B, but this is another killer pickup that I got in a brick and mortar store. All right, next is a record you bought online. I tend to really enjoy going to record stores. I really enjoy going to record stores and buying what's there and calling out to me. So I don't do a lot of online shopping. But I have shown two that I bought online, one of which is this Miles Davis Greatest Hits, which I mentioned I bought on eBay. The other is that John Coltrane album on the Impulse label that I bought from Newberry Comics. But I will say that an album that I want to buy online, that I'm going to buy online here pretty soon, is a record store day release from, I think last year, but it's Dave Pike, Jazz for the Jet Set Age, and I will leave a little picture of it right here if I can get one. But that is the next album that I'm probably going to buy online. Like I said, I like going to record stores. I like going there and seeing what calls out to me and picking up what I find. I'm not a huge online record shopper unless it's things I can't find, like the Love Supreme or pre-orders and things that are coming out as far as modern music goes. So, all right, so next is a record a friend found or gifted to you. My friend Amanda, who also collects records, gave this to me, and this was right when I started to get into jazz. Her and I kind of got into jazz around the same time, but this is Miles Davis' Sorcerer. So we're both kind of wading through jazz. We're bouncing jazz ideas off each other in albums, but she gave me this. This is the Vinyl Me Please pressing of it, and it is on a very nice pink vinyl, which I'll show you. This was right when Miles Davis was starting to experiment and get out of his traditional sound, but this was a very nice gift that my friend Amanda gave me. So an album that a friend found or gifted to you is Miles Davis' Sorcerer from my good friend Amanda. In these next two, my disclaimer comes in again. One is a jazz box set. I don't have a box set of anything. I can't think of an album where I want a box set yet. So no box set for jazz. And following that is a jazz 10-inch or 7-inch. And I don't have one of those. So those two, my disclaimer comes in again. Like I said, I'm getting into jazz. Eventually, I'll probably pick up a 7-inch. I don't really have any 10 inches. Not a huge collection of 7 inches, but I'm sure I'll probably pick up a cool jazz song here or there. And following that is your most recent jazz score. And this I picked up a couple weeks ago, and this is Miles Davis, Bitches Brew. This is the most recent jazz pickup I got. This, as I mentioned, I like the bossa nova stuff. There's not a lot of far out there jazz that I get into, but this album, it's along with that A Love Supreme. Before I started to actually buy jazz albums on vinyl, this was something that kind of just, I found myself going back to again and again and again. And I had never really thought about buying it, but when I was looking, I was on my honeymoon in St. Pete. I went to one record store, they had a copy of this. didn't buy it. And then I went to a second record store and they had like 3 copies of this in the shelf. And I was like, all right, if this isn't a sign, then I don't know what it is. So I ended up getting this. So this is my most recent jazz score. Miles Davis, Bitches Approved. And for the 3rd time in a row, Miles Davis is going to come up again. And that is a jazz record you hope to find in 2021. I mentioned this in the other vinyl tag that I did, that I think Dylan from Noble Records put on, but a record that I hope to find in 2021 for that was specifically a jazz record. So for this, I really want to find a 6i original press of Miles Davis Kind of Blue. I really like that album. I can buy a repress really easily, but if you collect records, you might know what I'm talking about, or I'm just weird, but there are certain records that I want to find nice, good original copies of, and I don't want to buy a repress of. And for some reason, I want to get an original copy of Miles Davis Kind of Blue. So that's an album that I hope to find in 2021. All right, question 19 is a jazz record you'd like to upgrade in 2021. And for that, we're going to go with Stan Getz and Gilberto. This is a really nice, clean copy of this. The reason that I want to upgrade this was recently I went to my local record store and I found one of those original master recordings with the text on top, and I didn't get it then because I knew I had this album, and I don't own any of those original master recordings. I'm sure at some point I'll get one, but I didn't get it then, and I was like, I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna listen to this record and see if it, if this sounds good and it justifies buying a new copy. And I went home and I listened to this record and I just forgot how just stunningly beautiful this record is, and didn't think that even if this copy is in good shape, I should get that original master recording copy of it. And I didn't get it. And I went back to the record store the next day to get that copy, just to have this is a good copy, really nice VG plus, almost near mint, but just to have a stunning Mo-Fi release of this, and it wasn't there. So this is an album that I hope to upgrade in 2021. And when I say upgrade, I want to get that original master recording of this album. Question 20, my disclaimer comes in again, and that is a free jazz record. I don't have any free jazz, to be honest with you. I'm not super familiar with what free jazz is. I'm sure as I get deeper into the waters here of jazz, I'll find a free jazz record, and if the question comes up again in another vinyl tag, I'm sure I'll have an answer for it. But right now, I don't have a free jazz record, so my disclaimer is coming back again. And last but certainly not least is a Deserted Island album, and for this I have to go with the Dave Brubeck Quartet, Time Out, featuring Take 5, Blue Rondo a la Turk, and this is just, if I'm sitting on an island, this has enough stimulation with tempo changes and faster paced jazz to keep me going, doing whatever I got to do on the island to survive. And it also has enough mellow stuff to just calm me down, put me to bed at night, and good to listen to by a campfire. So Deserted Island album is the Dave Brubeck Quartet, Time Out. Really, really phenomenal jazz album. Plus all these Time Out albums, the artwork on here is just spectacular. So that is my 2021 vinyl tag, or tunes tag, put on by Chris from Tunes from the Man Cave. So Chris, thank you for putting this list together. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, I'm very new to the field of jazz. I like the bossa nova jazz. Slowly kind of getting into other types of jazz. So if anybody sees any albums that they recommend or like, or anything like that, please comment below. I'm down to check out new jazz. I'd love to talk about any album that I have that I featured here so far. My name is Carl. This is Ryder's Record Collection. If you like this video, please throw it a like. If you like the channel, please consider subscribing. It would mean a lot. And I'll have some more content out for you soon. Until next time, cheers.